All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So good morning, everyone. My name is Alexa Wojtak. I am a coordinator for the Middle West Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalition. I'm also an energy programs administrator for the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation's Office of Energy Programs, which functions as the state energy office for Tennessee. And I'm pleased to be here with you all today for this virtual AutoGas Answers event. We have a suite of great speakers from the Propane Education Research Council, Alliance AutoGas, Grundy County Schools, as well as NetTrans, and then also East Tennessee Clean Fuels, our sister coalition. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. So if you could skip to the next slide. Great. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Clean Cities program, the Department of Energy's Clean Cities program consists of a variety of Clean Cities coalitions throughout the country, and these coalitions work to advance the nation's economic, environmental, and energy security by working locally to advance affordable domestic transportation fuels and technologies. So there's a national network of nearly 100 Clean Cities coalitions that work. They're kind of like boots on the ground coalitions that bring stakeholders together in the public and private sectors to help deploy alternative and renewable fuels, idle reduction measures, fuel economy improvements, and new transportation technologies as they emerge. In the state of Tennessee, there are two U.S. Department of Energy designated Clean Cities coalitions. If you could go to the next slide. Here you can see the two coalitions that we have in Tennessee. We've got the Middle West Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalition and the East Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalition. Middle West Tennessee Clean Fuels is housed out of the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, and the East Tennessee Clean Fuels is housed out of UT Knoxville in East Tennessee. Both coalitions are nonprofits that have been around for about 19 years. Combined, we have about 5 staff members and 3 part-time interns. We work collectively, even though we have these two coalitions, we work collectively and refer to ourselves jointly as Tennessee Clean Fuels. You can see that logo in the upper right-hand corner, which allows us to kind of tackle certain projects and programs holistically from a statewide angle. But then obviously we can drill down into specifics if we need to in our respective regions. And so the Clean Cities, one of our biggest strengths is helping fleets throughout the state of Tennessee find funding or ways to reduce their operating costs or their fuel costs or their maintenance costs by incorporating alternative fuels such as propane into their fleet and into their transportation duty cycles. If you could, next slide. This is just a slide to illustrate that we have a large cast of characters that we work with, public and private sector. These are some of our key stakeholders and partners that we've engaged with to implement alternative fuels throughout Tennessee. Some of these are users of electricity, some are users of propane, compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas, biodiesel, E85, you name it. So we've got a whole variety of folks here. And you can also see that we've got, some local governments, parcel delivery companies, garbage refuse companies, utility districts, school districts, and the like. And so we really work with a whole mix of folks to try and get these fuels and technologies implemented throughout our state. Next slide. And then here's some just quick high-level metrics on some of the accomplishments we've made in the last in our existence or even in recent years. And so you can see that we've displaced over 21 million gasoline gallon equivalents of petroleum just in 2019 alone. You can see over 134 million displaced since 2004. This equates to the amount from 2019 equates to a little over 99,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions that were reduced in 2019, with over 600,000 cumulative tons displaced since 2004. And then we've helped our stakeholders win over $6 million in grants to help support incremental costs or purchase costs to incorporate some of these technologies into their fleet. Next slide. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over. Our first speaker today is going to be Steve Whaley, who's the Director of AutoGas Business Development for the Propane Education and Research Council. Before I pass it over, though, I do want to just make a quick housekeeping note. This webinar is being recorded. If you have questions throughout the webinar, you can add those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will first go through all the presentations, and then at the end, we will hold the questions for a Q&A session at the end. So we will kick it off with Steve Whaley, followed by Billy Moon, and then Candace Long, Happy Fox, and then Jonathan Overly. And so we've got a full session in store, so I'll hand it over to Steve. Thanks, Steve.
Alexa, thank you very much. And I appreciate what you were saying earlier about the variety. I like that slide about the map of Tennessee, all the different kinds of fleets doing different kinds of services with different kinds of solutions. It really goes to that saying that there is no silver bullet, just a lot of different solutions that can meet individual fleet needs. And and I appreciate you having us here today to talk about propane autogas. And so with that, I'd kind of like to go back to what you were saying a little bit about all the displacement of gasoline and diesel that you guys have been able to achieve. And by the way, don't forget the 20th year anniversary that you guys are going to be celebrating. I want my invitation so that I can actually be there in person because I'm really tired of celebrating COVID. So don't forget to invite me when you guys get to have that 20-year party. But getting back to this on a much higher level of not just propane or any individual solution, what does it really take to have a successful energy adoption to take over what's existing there today? So there are 4 criteria that I'd like us just to kind of put in our head while we go out the session today. From me and the rest of the speakers, because quite frankly, I'll be so bold to say that if you can't do these 4 things as a potential alternative, then we just need to, as solution providers, we need to go home and figure it out and then come back to you. So if we're going to displace gasoline and diesel, we have to be cleaner than gasoline and diesel. We're not going to accept any kind of alternative that's not going to be cleaner than what we're trying to displace now. It has to be cleaner, it has to be cheaper, it has to cost less than what we're doing now, or quite frankly, the economic sustainability of it won't take place. I don't care how much subsidies and how much grants we think we might be able to throw at something. It has to be less expensive on a total cost of ownership, on a return on investment, on a cost per mile. All of those things have to take place if we're going to displace something that's in there now. It has to perform just as well, if not better, than what we're doing with our current gasoline and diesel today, without compromising on the range either. And then lastly, and of course, most importantly, we have to have a lot of this energy source that we are trying to displace what's currently out there. So how does propane autogas measure up in that? Well, we're going to show you today it's the most cost-effective way of reducing the most harmful emissions, NOx, on the whole spectrum. We do have the lowest cost of ownership of any fuel, including the conventional fuels that are out there today. And we have at least as good a performance, and I think you're going to see after today, actually there's increased performance without compromising on the range either. I'm hoping Billy will tell us about the tank sizes he has on his buses, because if he has those 400-mile range buses, then you don't even have to worry about it for the field trips and such. And of course, we have more propane in these United States than all the other countries. We are the leader in the world for propane production. We used 9 billion gallons of it this last year, but we had a whopping export of 19 billion gallons. And with all of you attending today that are going to convert your fleets over to propane, we're going to knock that down a notch by the end of today's session. So what is this propane autogas? And well, Steve, why do you call it autogas instead of propane? Is it something different? No, it's exactly the same fuel that we have out on our patio that's firing up our grills to cook our hamburgers and steaks and things like that. It's extremely clean, or we wouldn't let it touch our food. But we use it in millions of homes throughout the United States for heating and for agriculture on farms. Tremendous amount of use in forklifts for decades and decades, because it's always been safe to use inside warehouses because the emissions don't kill people like some of our other more dirty fossil fuels. And then it's in a lot of off-road applications as well, especially in the commercial mowers. But it is the exact same fuel that we use. And I'm not sure why this is all a little bit different on the slide here, but we have two sources of propane. One is an organic source, and that's the vast majority of where we're getting it, coming right from our own soil. But we also have renewable sources that we're going to talk about at the very end on our pathway to zero in emissions and greenhouse gases. Both of them are the exact same molecular structure. They're non-toxic. It can't contaminate air, soil, or water because it doesn't spill. As soon as it hits the atmosphere, it actually evaporates, and so you can't have any of that contamination. So why are fleets choosing it? Well, it's about the money. That's at the top of the list. It's way less expensive than what we're using now, and it is much cleaner. I'm hoping Billy will talk a little bit about the driver experience that he's having, because that noise is quite a new factor when folks are going from a diesel bus to a propane bus, because drivers actually get to hear what's going on their buses. But of course, they are less maintenance. We'll talk a little bit about that. Improved corporate image. I mean, going green is very, very popular, but the employee morale for driving propane powered vehicles and that driver retention has been astounding. We'll get into a little bit of that too. Every single alternative fuel has a path to zero emissions. Now, none of us will ever achieve really zero emissions, because there's an emission from tire wear, there's an emission from brake pads, there's an emission from everything on a vehicle that's moving down the road. But we're all striving to get as close to zero as we possibly can. So how has propane measured up? Well, when we first got started, we noticed a huge reduction in particulate matter. This is something on a diesel bus where you have a particulate matter filter because that particulate is so dangerous to our environment. NOx reductions is the worst for respiratory illness cause, and especially in environments where we have very small children, very close to a tailpipe height, especially during a lot of idle time. This NOx is a bad deal. So what we've done is reduce those NOx immensely. And although clean diesel and propane both meet EPA and CARB standards, propane engines have gone way beyond that and achieved much lower, ultra low NOx emissions. So much so that the University of West Virginia, that busted Volkswagen for their NOx scandal, did a study with the best-in-class clean diesel and the best-in-class propane engine, and they put their mobile emission testing on both of these vehicles that were on the same route, traveling together for several months. What they found was astounding. Even like I said, both of them meet the EPA standards, but the propane bus was 96% cleaner than that clean diesel bus on the most harmful of these emissions. Greenhouse gases is the other one. Our new technologies are making great headway in this with their efficiencies, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. And we are also doing a lot of headway with the renewable propane we'll get to. Now, fuel and maintenance costs. Now, Happy is going to be talking about fuel and prices, so I'm not going to steal his thunder, but it just gives you some ideas of how well it is. But I will talk a little bit more about the savings we have on the maintenance side. Okay, because with a propane bus, it operates so clean, we don't have to have all of the diesel after treatment that our diesel engines are required to have to meet any of these particular standards, including the diesel exhaust fluid that gets mounted on there and all of the diesel emission reduction equipment that is necessary to make this happen on a diesel bus. Now, remember, in 2024, there's a new set of lower emissions that these engines are going to require, and it's even going to be more equipment and more cost to maintain that equipment on diesel buses for the 2024 standards as well as the 2027 standards. Propane has already met the 2027 standards. It's that clean. Just to give you an idea of how much that costs, these components, especially that catalyst assembly for the diesel particulate filter, are very expensive when they need to be replaced over the life of that vehicle. Compared to a propane engine that's basically is using 7 quarts of oil and a $5 filter, most of the diesel is anywhere from 17 to 30 quarts of oil with very expensive filters. So on that PM comparison, that preventative maintenance comparison, we're saving about $200 for every oil change. So what is the current offering of vehicles that we can do on propane? Well, I've always liked to say anything that runs with a spark plug, we can make it work with propane, and technologically we certainly can. But it's been implemented in a lot of law enforcement and a lot of shuttle vans and utility vans. We've been in a lot of mid-duty vehicles, especially in school bus, and that's where we shine the brightest, actually. These are some of the manufacturers that are providing solutions for vehicles with propane autogas. Roush CleanTech is one of them. They work in the Ford family of trucks, from that strip chassis for the step vans all the way up through the E-Series 350 and 450, all the way into the heavy Class 7 33,000 GVW. And of course, Roush supplies Bluebird with the propane engines for their Type C buses and microbirds. Freightliner Custom Chassis also has 2 different engine sources that they can put in theirs that both operate on propane. And the Drive Force engine comes in an 8.0 or an 8.8 liter to take care of the Class 6 and 7 for those Freightliner Custom Chassis. Power Solutions International is one of those, and they just achieved that ultra low NOx emission standard for EPA and CARB. That's that 0.02, and Agility has the 8.0 liter, which is right next door in North Carolina, Salisbury, North Carolina. Greencraft in California also has a ultra low NOx for their cab over solutions that they provide. Alliance AutoGas, and Happy is going to talk about this, so I'm going to go right on past it and mention that Alliance AutoGas, along with ICOM and Campbell Parnell, all are aftermarket solutions that allow you to take existing gasoline vehicles in your fleet and convert them over to propane. So where's the best success story that AutoGas has had? And it has been in that school bus arena. All 3 school bus manufacturers provide propane as a solution. Now, I was actually doing a program yesterday with the national sales manager for Bluebird, and they did announce that 2020 was an important year for them, because their alternative fuel school buses actually now surpassed their manufacturing of diesel buses. It was 48% last year, and then this year it's actually going to be over 50% of their buses are non-diesel. Now, I've got to make a little bit of a change on this because just this morning we got our numbers in, and it's not 20,000 propane autogas school buses that are in these United States like it was earlier in the spring. We're actually at 21,000 school buses now operating across the country in over 1,000 school districts. And when all of them are fully open, we're moving 1.25 million students to and from school every day. And one of the reasons why propane is so popular is we have those huge emissions that I was talking about from diesel, 96% of the way there. But we also have a very small incremental cost over diesel. I'll pick on Bluebird here because they manufacture all 4 of these energy solutions for that Type C bus. And when they're all equipped exactly the same way, except for the differential in the power source, you can see that propane has a very small incremental cost. CNG has about a 34% increase, but there's a substantial amount of money that's needed to make this happen in the electric environment. Okay, and so much so that the Volkswagen school bus funding numbers are quite telling, with the blue being the amount of money awarded and the yellow being the number of buses deployed. You can see the right side up equation that propane has for reducing the most amount of dangerous emissions. And I'll do a little comparison here as well. 2 states were studied over the last 15 years, Texas and California. California invested $816 million in funding for over-the-road emission reductions in the vehicle space and reduced 35,000 tons of that nitrogen oxide. Now, Texas had a little bit of different approach. It's much like what the Clean Cities approach is. It's a all of the above kind of answer in the alternative space, depending on whether it's a passenger electric vehicle or a CNG, tractor trailer in that Class 8 environment, or if it's propane in that mid duty, they had that all the above approach, and they were able to reduce almost twice as much nitrogen oxides with substantially less money. So what are we doing with propane now? What's that next school bus success? And it's in the area of the medium duty, that class 3 through 7, because they use a lot more fuel. And as you know, with propane being substantially cheaper than gasoline and diesel, the more fuel that you use, obviously, the more savings that you're going to incur. And then we're not just for the short haul route in the inner city. We're able to do much longer regional routes and even coast to coast with the number of public access to propane fuel sites. So what are those 3 targets that we're seeing the most growth in? Well, it's in the food and beverage is one of them. Schwann's Home Delivery, especially in these COVID times with folks having deliveries to their home, has gone crazy. They have over 4,000 trucks now operating on propane. Nestle Water started about 5 years ago with just 5 trucks as a pilot test, but now have over 1,000 of their water delivery trucks operating on propane. Paratransit is another one. Just to give you an example, the shuttle buses that are deployed, and we're actually going to be talking about them here in just a little bit with one of our panelists, Candace. But the amount of fuel that those shuttle buses are using is about twice as much as what school buses use, because they're operating more during the day than the frequency of the school buses back and forth. One of the most highest users are in that parcel package delivery. We've seen even in Alexis's slide of UPS's adoption of alternative fuels, of which they have over 1,000 of them operating on propane, FedEx, Ground, and DHL. But the United States Postal Service has independent contractors that move the vast majority of their mail between distribution centers and hubs. And they have lots of trucks, and 10,000 of these box trucks are operating around the country every day, 6.5 days a week, day and night. And they're using over 1,000 gallons of fuel per truck. So if you want to make a huge difference in your fuel cost savings as well as your emission reductions, that's a great way to go. And they're in every zip code of these United States. So we have calculators that determine in the future how much you potentially can save. But what I wanted to do this year is do some forensic historical study. So I've been doing case studies to actually measure exactly what the costs were to operate these vehicles. And this is just one of about 7 studies that I got done this last year, with going back over 5 years and collecting every single maintenance record for a set of trucks exactly the same year, just one on diesel and one on propane in the same company, operating in the same area, with the same weight and the same duty cycles, and adding up all the maintenance costs for those and adding up all the fuel costs for those. And in this particular case, we have that class 7 bobtail truck, and it's 29 cents a mile for every mile cheaper. Now, we're not going to talk about infrastructure right now because Happy's going to cover that, but I did want to show a slide that shows how you can find all of the alternative fuel station locators on the DOE All Fuel Station Locator site. And you can see from the purple dots here, propane has a widespread use of public, but even those, they are overshadowed by the private stations that are set up because it's so inexpensive. And Happy will tell you about this. You can get it set up for your fleet right at your particular facility. And then there's also a mobile app on the left that I use to find and fill my personal truck that runs on propane wherever I travel throughout the United States. So what are the technology innovations that we have on the horizon? We've been working with Cummins, that little engine manufacturer that supplies the second most number of engines in the world. They have embarked on a project with us that we have funded to take their 6.7 liter block and build a propane engine up from scratch in their lab that would highlight the best of the characteristics that propane has to offer, especially with its high octane. And so they did, and they surprised everybody with how well this thing performed. High compression ratios equate to high efficiencies, and those efficiencies also equate to very low greenhouse gas emissions. But one of the astounding things here, and if you're not used to looking at torque and horsepower curves, each one of those colored lines represent one of the engines that's in that box right there. But on top of all those, you see that black line that's arching over there, and that's where diesel is, okay? And that's their best diesel for first responder, fire trucks, and things like that. But what happened with propane is something that's never happened before. We actually beat diesel in horsepower and torque. And this is very scalable. It's not just for the 6.7 liter. It can go on any of those Cummins platforms. But we got up to 375 horsepower and 880 foot-pounds of torque and surpassed diesel's performance with that. So now, what are we doing with the fuel as far as innovation and moving forward? Well, 10 years ago, if you remember, we were doing some carbon reduction goals in just a few states where legislation was passing that. Fast forward 10 years, and now over 50% of the population of these United States has put into their legislative action to reduce their carbon footprint in their states. So we knew that now with renewable propane. It has a lot of advantages. We're manufacturing it in Louisiana now, with RAG being at the top of the list, producing 5 million gallons a year. Renewable DME, which is blended then with propane to provide a carbon index that's barely 11 in carbon intensity, is happening a lot in Southern California right now with the dairy waste. But let's do a comparison now of greenhouse gases throughout a life cycle. A life cycle analysis. And because electricity is considered the cleanest of all transportation energy, we're going to use that as our baseline as a comparison. So where does the grid get its energy source from? Well, we can look at the map here, and each state has its comprised recipe. As you can see, Wyoming and West Virginia and some of the others have a very high concentration of coal that feeds their electric grid. You can see other states where natural gas has a much higher percentage of that, not much on the petroleum or biomass side. What are the renewable sources for the grid? Well, nuclear is one of those. And in my home state of South Carolina here, and you can see in Tennessee as well, we have a pretty good amount of nuclear that's going into the grid, but not much more nuclear is being added. Hydro is extremely popular in the Pacific Northwest, and it's very clean. But not too much new hydro is on the horizon either. We have a certain amount of dams and rivers that we can do. Solar, obviously in the California, Nevada areas is prevalent, and we have wind going through the middle states of our country. Not much on the geothermal side. So let's add it all up and do a comparison. On the left, we have our regular conventional propane. And there's a range of 79 to 83 with the government's assignment of carbon intensity scores, okay? And then we look at the electric grid, and the government assignment of carbon intensity scores are there as well. We can look at Tennessee with 130 basically carbon intensity score compared to 79 with conventional propane now. So how does this translate into greenhouse gases? Okay, so let's take a look at 5 little case studies that we're going to do real quick. And each of these case studies is comparing one Class 7 box truck moving 200 miles a day, one powered by propane and one powered by the electric grid into batteries in a vehicle. And on that one-to-one comparison over a 1-year time period, the numbers in each of these states reveal how many tons of CO2 differential there is between the two. For example, in South Carolina, where I'm at, the electric grid is going to provide 4 tons of CO2 emission reductions compared to a propane vehicle of the same one. In Tennessee, your electric grid, because of that, you're going to have 49 tons of CO2 emissions cleaner operating with conventional propane than you will off of your electric grid. So when we go and actually introduce renewable propane, you can see how much more drastic it is in its greenhouse gas reductions compared to the electric grid in each of these states. When we use renewable DME, like I was talking about, it's even cleaner. But when we combine our best case scenario of renewable propane blended with renewable diesel or renewable DME, we have astounding carbon reductions of CO2. Well, Steve, that's not fair because the electric grid is getting cleaner too. So let's fast forward to 2035. And we're going to give the electric grid a 95% of its generation coming from renewable sources. And we're going to extend the battery cycles from 1,000 of today to about 5,000, that million-mile battery. And then we'll compare it to the best of what we have with our blend of renewable propane. And you can see that we're not just a bridge fuel. We are a fuel that will sustain carbon reductions throughout the next decade. If you want to compare all this, since this is being recorded, you can check all of the sources for measuring how we came to those conclusions. Speaking of conclusions, this is it. The benefits of propane and renewable propane is extremely cost effective. If you look at any incremental cost to move away from gasoline and diesel, you'll find that propane has the lowest cost of all. Averages about 15%, sometimes it's on parity with diesel, but it's very sustainable because of a low incremental cost that's overcome with fuel savings very easily. And we do this with no payload loss, especially on the larger vehicles where it gets much heavier with alternatives to move that heavier vehicle. We don't have any payload loss at all. And of course, we reviewed the CO2 greenhouse gas emissions quite thoroughly. Everything that I've talked about here today is actually even more is on propane.com. And I look forward to the questions that we're stimulating throughout the program here. And I'll go ahead and let Alexa introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. All right, so we're going to hand it over. Next up, we have Billy Moon, who's the transportation supervisor for Grundy County Schools. Billy, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. As Alexa said, I'm the transportation supervisor for Grundy County Schools. In 2019, we applied and were awarded the grant from TDEC through the Volkswagen settlement. We received $539,600 to purchase 7 propane buses. In March, we received our first 4 buses as the pandemic hit, and therefore we didn't get to put those in operation until August when we returned to school. I have the first 4 did arrive in March. I have 3 more coming, should arrive this week. So far, the students and drivers appear to be happy with them. Talking with the drivers, they are impressed with the power that the propane buses have, how much quieter they are. And as Steve noted, I mean, they can hear things that they haven't heard before, just from the noise level being less than. The mechanics are enjoying them so far. Of course, understanding we've got new buses, hopefully we're not having a lot of problems, and we aren't, other than just the normal glitch of a new vehicle getting the bugs worked out. But they're enjoying the less emissions and less service time involved. AutoGas is our current propane supplier. They have supplied Grundy County schools with propane for our schools for over 20 years now. And that being said, with our well, I've lost for words, but they've been our supplier, and because of them being our supplier, they have helped us with our propane infrastructure with 2 fueling sites. One at our high school, which is where the majority of our buses congregate, and another one at the bus garage, where I have a couple of buses fueling here. As you can see in the slide, our current price for the whole year, we bid out annually, is $1.16 per gallon. I purchased diesel fuel about a month ago, and at that time I paid $1.32. So not a lot of difference at this point, understanding that our cost for diesel does not include highway taxes and all the taxes associated that you'd be paying through the pump. So adding that in, that cost would add up to about another 50 cents per gallon on that. 2 of the biggest things I've noticed since we've had the propane buses is, naturally, as Steve said, they use 7 quarts of oil versus around 5 gallon for our diesel buses. We have to fuel the propane buses a little more often. Our diesel buses had a 100-gallon fuel tank on them. The propane buses have a 93-gallon tank, which you can only use 80% of the capacity with propane. So that leaves us with about a 75-gallon. So far, with my driver learning how to maneuver with the propane buses as far as acceleration and stop and start and all that, our fuel mileage isn't where I was hoping it would be. It's actually less than, which is a lot of that, like I say, is due to driver habits, and some of it is the fuel itself. So on that saying, we are averaging around 4.5 miles to gallon with propane on the same route where we were averaging around 7.5 miles per gallon. So one of the biggest questions that people ask me is, why did you go with propane? Well, as a transportation supervisor and talking with other school systems who had been using propane and knowing what we've dealt with here with a lot of the emissions issues with the diesel engines and the cost of a lot of the repairs for those things, that led to my decision to move towards propane. The newer emission standards for the diesel engines have a lot of expense associated with them. For those who don't know, I mean, as Steve noted, you have to add a diesel exhaust fluid, and that's about $1.80 a gallon or more, depending on how you buy it. You can buy it in gallons or you can buy it in bulk. And we go through on an annual, about 200 gallon a year of that just in on the buses that we have that require that. And as I said earlier, there takes less oil and filters for the propane, which makes the cost of the service a lot less, which takes a lot less time for my mechanics, which they enjoy. Some of the parts for the propane engine can be purchased through some of our local parts stores, as I checked on before I made this venture and leap. So we've only had our buses in operation for around 5 months. So to give you a long-term cost, I don't have that to share with you at this time. But as time goes, I'm keeping track of it, and hopefully I will have more information as time progresses. That pretty much sums it up for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Billy.
Welcome.
Great. Now we're gonna hand it over to Candace Long with NetTran.
Okay. Hi, everyone. As Alexa said, I am Candace Long, and I'm the Director of Transportation for First Tennessee Human Resource Agency's NetTrans program. Sorry, let me just advance the slide. Okay. So first I'll tell you just a little bit about who we are and what we do. We operate demand response door-to-door transportation service in the 8 rural counties of Upper East Tennessee and in the urbanized areas of Bristol, Johnson City, and Kingsport. We have a fleet of 130 wheelchair accessible vehicles, of which 25 are converted to operate by fuel, so they'll operate on gasoline and propane autogas. We travel over 303 million miles a year, transporting over 167,000 people. So as you can imagine, we purchase a lot of fuel. So we were looking at ways that we could reduce our operating costs, and that was the beginning of our Alternative Clean Fuels program. We chose propane autogas because it's better for the environment, it's less expensive to operate than gasoline, and there was no large upfront cost for us to get the fueling system in place. We purchased 220,000 gallons of gasoline each year and over 50,000 gallons of propane. So that gives us the opportunity to, because propane is about $1 less per gallon, it gives us the opportunity to reduce our operational costs by about $50,000 per year. And there were some obstacles along the way as we started our program. East Tennessee doesn't really have fueling infrastructure for propane autogas. So we partnered with Alliance AutoGas to provide the tank and the pumping system. And the first phase of our project was Carter County, and we provided the site prep. So we provided a 5x10 concrete pad, electricity, and safety bollards. And we were able to go about doing that a little bit creatively as well. I contacted the Carter County Mayor and inquired about having the trustees from the local jail provide the labor at no cost. And then of course, we just provided the materials. Phase 2 and phase 3 of our projects were Greenville and Kingsport. And those projects, we did community partnerships with Alliance AutoGas and other entities in the community that wanted to convert their fleets over to propane as well, so that we could share fueling infrastructure. The tanking system looks very similar to a regular gasoline pump. The driver pulls up connects the nozzle and operates it just the same as they would if they were fueling with gasoline. And we had our mechanics trained to actually install the kits themselves. They traveled to Swannanoa, North Carolina, where they went through about 60 hours of training to install the conversion kits. And then it was an additional 10 hours of training for to learn how to properly maintain everything. And the drivers received 2 hours of training on how to operate the pumps at the various locations, locating the emergency shutoff valves, the fueling process itself, and various other safety videos. Each tank of propane will last us about 300 miles. And of course, we operate a lot of miles in a day. So we set our vehicles up to be bi-fuel. So they'll operate on propane or on gasoline. And the vehicle switches over automatically. So there's not any interaction needed by the driver. And the drivers have reported back that they don't notice a difference. So they can't tell if they're operating on propane or gasoline unless they look at the indicator on their dashboard. And they've also reported that there's not any change in like the amount of power that they have while they're operating on propane. Our fuel cards work just like our other fleet card programs. They give us the same capability. We can see the date and time that the drivers purchase gasoline. We can see the amount of gallons and all of the same information as other fleet card programs. In 2015, when we started our project, we projected a cost savings, a net cost savings of $9,000 per vehicle over a 5-year period. And we are pleased to announce that we have exceeded those projections by approximately $200 per vehicle. And I know everyone's super busy. We all have a lot of things that are pulling us in different directions throughout the day. So the thought of, taking on a project of this magnitude might seem overwhelming, but I can assure you that it is not. The amount of time and effort that goes into the project outweighs the benefits 10 times over. I would encourage anyone that's considering the project to look for community resources that are available to assist you, and to make sure that you engage your funding partners, your board of directors, the media, and really generate a lot of excitement and good attention for your organization. So, okay, that's all that I have. I am looking forward to questions at the end, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Candace. All right, and so our next speaker is going to be Happy Fox with Alliance AutoGas.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. Thanks for joining us today on the for this AutoGas Answers in Tennessee, even though we're all remotely. And let's see here, Alexa, could I get a little bit of help? I'm not able to move the screens. Here we go. I think there we go. Thank you. Good morning again. My name is Happy Fox. I'm a representative with Alliance AutoGas. We are a division of Blossman Propane Gas Company. Blossman Propane Gas Company was started in 1951 in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and is now, since then, we've expanded to our coverage area. Goes from Ocean Springs, Mississippi over to Miami, up into Maryland, down into Kentucky, back down into Ocean Springs. So we have a really good significant footprint in the southeastern region of the country. In 2009, Alliance AutoGas was founded. And basically, the program from Alliance AutoGas through Blossman was to be able to provide a complete program to be able to help anyone considering or looking into an AutoGas program for their fleets. So we don't have to be involved in every area, but we offer the services to be involved in every area, whether it's vehicle technology and conversions, whether it's refueling infrastructure and fuel, whether it is maintenance and ongoing support once your AutoGas program is up and running. So one other brief intro on us as before I get into other details in the infrastructure portion. Our systems are all EPA certified. That is critical, as Steve mentioned earlier, and as Billy and Candace have mentioned. EPA certified is going to guarantee that that system is reducing emissions being emitted from those vehicles or those buses. The other EPA certification helps with is, as Candace mentions, and Billy both have done this, if there's grants or funding available, that will help to be able to connect to that grant or funding to certify that you're providing an advanced alternative fuel to reduce emissions. Our systems are biofuel, as Candace mentioned. Billy talked about earlier on the buses. Those are a dedicated propane system, which work great. On our systems, as Steve mentioned, we're after the market. So our systems are going to start on gas. And then when they get to operating temperature, they're automatically going to switch over to being powered by propane. And then when it runs out, it's going to automatically switch back over to gas should you run out. But it's just going to be a continuous program each time it goes through that same cycle of starting on gas, automatically switching over to propane. A lot of the different vehicles that people look at or that you may want to consider for your fleet for an AutoGas program, law enforcement. These could be in sedans or these can be in SUV vehicles that are equipped for law enforcement fleets. Another segment is service and delivery vehicles, mid-sized sedans, or possibly smaller SUV vehicles, maybe done for service, for inspections, for route deliveries, etc. One of the bigger segments is the standard trucks and the transit vans like Candace and they operate at NetTrans. These vehicles can range from the F-150 up to the 750. These can range from the Chevy vans, GM Express vans, and Dodge Ram vans, etc. So whether it's any of those vehicles, they can be adapted to be equipped to be operate within an AutoGas program. Another key component would be the upfitted vehicles, whether it's an E-Series truck, whether it's an F-Series, whether it's a utility body or a special body like you see in this slide here for a bobtail. These all can be equipped to be powered by propane. Again, these are all biofuel systems. They come with a service warranty, etc. But you can see in this picture here, there's the big bobtail on the back carrying the propane, and the white cylinder you see on the side is a propane tank that is used for fuel for this vehicle. These vehicles would range from Ford and Chevy and GM over to Dodge and Ram vehicles. And it would also include a few Nissan vehicles, as well as some Isuzu vehicles. And so if there's a vehicle that you have in your fleet that's interested, we'd be glad to help to review that to see if there would be an EPA certification and a system available for that vehicle. To not be redundant, I'll jump through this slide here, but it is important. One of the key components is to make sure that your AutoGas program is reducing emissions. The other key component, and Steve's slide had one of these on his as well, I noticed. This is about a week ago. This is just showing the average propane price throughout the country for AutoGas. It is, we have it active. We change it regularly on our website at Alliance AutoGas. So you're able to check and see what the fuel price is in that area. Again, it's an average price. And as Steve and others have mentioned, it is a little bit, generally it's about 30% cheaper than gas, even more than diesel. Right now, years ago, that price was a little bit higher. It was maybe $1.50 or $2 difference. Right now, we're under compressed pricing, but we're still able to offer savings, as you saw in Billy's slide earlier, compared to diesel. So one quick testimony before I jump into the AutoGas infrastructure portion is, one of the neatest stories is when we're able, on the bottom part of there, it talks about any reliable emergency fuel. When we're able to talk to a transit agency or a law enforcement or a service delivery company, when there's disruption in the power supply, disruption in the pipeline, and we're able to provide services and accessibility to fleets to be able to continue to operate their program during those, to help provide supplies, move people out of harm's way. It is just a great testimony of service for an AutoGas program that we're really glad to be a part of that. So we want to do a little more of a deep dive here into the AutoGas infrastructure. There's 3 basic programs for that. One of them is going to be on-site fueling, which could be at your fleet. There where they come back home, you've got control over it. It's on your site. Candace showed a good slide of the site prep going on for their site. Another infrastructure could be a shared site, and that could be where more than one fleet are refueling at that site in a general easy access location for 2 or more fleets. And then the other could be at a branch. And I'll go into more details on each one of these in just a minute. But basically, the tank size on those fleets can be, depending on the size, could be a 1,000 gallon tank, 2 1,000 gallons. It could be 3 gallons, 3 tanks there or more, or sometimes it just could be an oversized tank that would hold maybe 1,900 gallons. We'll go into just a minute on the easy of dispersion of the fuel with the Triton dispenser and all that it offers. The electrical, there's 2 different programs to where you can look at for AutoGas. Billy mentioned part of it where your supplier is providing the tank and the dispenser and the upkeep and the maintenance for all of that equipment. That's generally what we do with our program through Blossoming Gas. There is the option for the customer to be able to purchase a tank and a dispenser. And that gets into be a little bit more expensive. I think Billy had it in his slide to where it saved them tens of thousands of dollars. We would be glad to share more details. Every situation is a little bit different. In either of those scenarios, the customer generally pays for the electrical connections to that site, and they generally pay for the safety protection for that site. But we make sure that all the permitting is followed. We make sure that the safety regulations are followed, and we make sure that that maintenance, that upkeep is done each year. On our equipment, we inspect it twice a year. When the drivers are refueling at the tanks, they're inspecting it virtually each time that they're by there doing a delivery. So this is a picture of one of our branches. We have one in Maryville, Tennessee that has a 24/7 refueling site. It's easy to refuel. It has the Stodley Quick Connect nozzle. It is 24/7 availability, generally with covered and lit. And then if there's ever an issue, one of our staff members is generally there during business hours to be able to provide service. But we have many different fleets that do take the option to refuel at our branches. Another refueling is on site at your facility. Candace Gump has this at their, Candace Long, excuse me, has it at their site in Elizabethton. Kingsport also has on site at their facility in Kingsport, Tennessee. Basically, it operates a centralized force for your fleet to be able to refuel. It gives you control over it. We still come, or your other service provider, if you had another one, they would come to that site to maintain and provide service and refuel your tanks there on site to be able to refuel your vehicles. When we own the equipment, which is a less cost for you all, we do all the maintenance. We're in charge of making sure that tank, the connections, the pump, the motor, all of it is kept up to date, filters, and kept up to running speed without any disruptions. It's just one simple call to make sure that that site can be maintained. Here's a picture where we were at Kingsport. This is a site that is going to be used by the city of Kingsport. It is a primary source for net trans for them to be able to refuel there. This is a joint venture with multiple entities. U-Haul is involved because this is at a U-Haul site. Net trans involved because they refuel there. The city of Kingsport has their refueling on the other side of town. So this worked out to be a great partnership for all of us involved. This is a card reader system. So with this system, the drivers are able to refuel there, and whoever refuels there, it is charged to their specific and individual accounts. So to get into a little bit more details on the dispenser part, the dispenser has all vehicles required in January 1, 2020, are required to have the Quick Connect filler valve and the Quick Connect nozzle. So with that nozzle, no safety protection is required. The vehicle, you run through the card reader system, the card goes in, you put in your driver number, your vehicle number, mileage. That way we're able to share the data with you for each refueling. And then until you connect the nozzle to the vehicle. Once it's connected, it's going to feel very similar to gasoline and diesel. When that tank is full, it's going to shut off just like other systems do. And then you simply disconnect the nozzle and hang it back up on the meter. We do have the capability now with the card reader system to be able to accept Visa, MasterCard, Comdata, and WEX cards. That has just been a really cool system to be able to expand that offering into programs. Another site where we have shared refueling with NetTrans is in Greenville, Tennessee. And then we have other sites in Tennessee to where we have shared refueling as well. This is our wonderful, it was a rainy day, but we had a good time with Candace and Jonathan. Steve was around with this, for this as well. But with NetTrans, they have refueling site in Elizabethton, Greenville, and Kingsport. And we're looking at 2 and 3 other sites now to where we can be able to help them to refuel. We want to be known as a service provider. So anything that we can do to assist a company, a business, an entity with their program, that's what we're all about. And to close, real customers and referrals have been the highlight of business and my work in Tennessee. Specifically, it has been great to work with Jonathan and East Tennessee Clean Fuels. Candace has been a wonderful provider for NetTrans, and we have been glad to grow and expand with their program. And certainly, if you need another resource, Steve Hightower with Kingsport has been a champion and a great ambassador for Propane AutoGas. I think they have well over 100 vehicles now in their fleet, and they have had a program for a number of years. They were one of the leaders. So if you need to reach out to see a facility, reach out to talk to someone other than on the panel today, Steve Hightower would be a great resource. Here's my contact information. If I can be of any help with any questions regarding propane autogas programs, I'll be glad to do it. Thanks for the time today and appreciate everyone joining in.
Thank you, Happy. All right, Jonathan, I'm going to hand it over to you to touch on some funding opportunities that can help fleet offset costs for some of these projects.
Gotcha. Thank you, Alexa. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So just one slide, folks. I'll try to go through these fairly quickly, but give you some key things to note. There may be a funding opportunity I have left out, but I think these are the majority of the current opportunities that we know of. That starts with the first one. That funky acronym stands for Reducing Diesel Emissions for a Healthier Tennessee. You can see the logo in the upper right-hand corner. And this is state EPA funding. Basically, about 6 years ago, we started working with a division of TDEC in Tennessee to manage this funding and started this particular program that focuses on prioritizing alternative fuel vehicles over applications for new diesel, for example, vehicles. It is called Reducing Diesel Emissions. It's focused on class 4 and up vehicles. And you do have to destroy the old vehicle in the program as you get a new vehicle. People can apply for new diesel vehicles, but they are a secondary or tertiary priority over people that apply for alternative fuels like propane. Propane is far and away the most popular fuel that has been applied for in this program. We have about $300,000 each year. So the good news is that we have that money almost every year. The bad news is it's a fairly small amount compared to other pockets of funding you see. But for example, we have about 6 applicants right now we are speaking with, and we have more in applications than we have in funds to give away for the 2020-2021 year, which we're right at the time right now where we're trying to figure out who we're going to be able to award, get those contracts ready so that we can get the contracts done in January and then start acquiring those vehicles to hopefully have them operational by summer next year. That program does try to get things moving quickly. So one of the bonuses for some people is that those funds come out in October. We try to announce the winning applicants in December, and then basically by the next summer, they need to have these vehicles in use. Sometimes municipalities, other businesses are trying to plan 1, 2, 3 years out, and some funds will look more towards future years as far as when you might be implementing. This one works pretty quick. Other good news about that funding program is it's a 2-page application. So it's very easy to apply for. There are some additional documents that are required there, like title and registration of old vehicles, but it's really pretty easy and recurring funding program. And in most years, we try to provide funds to all of the applicants. If we ever get to a point where we start getting, 3-4 times as many applications in terms of dollars than we have in terms of funds, then there's probably going to be some cases where we can't do that. But that's the RDE funds. CMAQ, this has been around for a very long time. CMAQ stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, probably on the order of 30 years old in terms of funding that comes through federal highways and flows down to state DOTs to manage each year in their state. Tennessee usually has a number that's about $40 to $45 million a year in terms of CMAQ funds, but it is limited to former non-attainment areas. That means Knox and about 7 surrounding counties, Davidson County in Nashville and several surrounding counties, and then Hamilton and Shelby counties on the south side of Tennessee are the counties that can apply for this. If you're in a more rural area, depending on where you are, CMAQ is not an opportunity. It's just a limitation of that funding, but it is a lot of funds. They recently have started implementing a Buy America requirement, or at least getting a little bit more stringent on how that requirement works. And for propane, this is actually, I think, some good news. So the way this works, if you have, since Happy showed a bobtail, I'll use a bobtail as an example. If someone wants to get a new vehicle that is going to run on alternative fuel, it's fairly common that it's a system like Alliance AutoGas, Steve Whaley mentioned Roush, that gets added to that vehicle. For CMAQ, what's probably going to happen is it's going to have to be an additional system that gets added to that vehicle. And then what we need to do is see if that system is Buy America compliant. If it is, then we can get a waiver for that and sidestep kind of a big issue that can be around for vehicles in pursuing CMAQ funds. If we also eliminate the rest of the vehicle, which in some cases is a negative, because if someone wants a % of the total amount of dollars for the additional propane system and the vehicle, which is not uncommon in terms of VW and some other funding programs, the problem is the vehicle then needs to be Buy America compliant, which is next to impossible. So the upshot of this is that for fleets in certain areas that have a Buy America system that get put on a vehicle, a Buy America compliant system, there's a possibility of a funding source that might cover 50 to 80% of that incremental cost. So while it's a lot of dollars, it's probably only going to be able to cover part of the incremental cost for that vehicle. But because it's so much money in Tennessee for fleets that fit some of these issues, it could be a significant amount of money toward them adding to or starting a propane fleet. And CMAQ also can go into light duty. It's not restricted like some of these other sources are that are really just focused on diesel vehicles of certain sizes. CMAQ can include everything from light duty cars and trucks all the way up to heavy duty vehicles. So there are some options there. The Tennessee VW funds, Alexa's one of the folks that manages that money. There have been 3 rounds that have been put out. There's a 4th round coming, but basically what we know right now is that it's possible that there is another release of funds, and they don't know whether that might focus on mass transit, school buses, class 4 through 8 trucks. We're not sure. We don't know yet of that, but there is a possible future release of that. I don't know the exact dollars. I meant to put a question mark after that 5 million. It might be a little less or a little bit more than that, but just stay tuned because there may be other funds for vehicles coming out in 2021 or 2022 for Tennessee VW funds. Tennessee VW funds, like the RDE, require you to destroy the old vehicle, and it's focused on older diesels. But it's very, so far in the first rounds, they have covered a significant portion of the vehicle cost. It is not necessarily geographically limited. No matter what county you're in Tennessee, you at least have an opportunity to apply There are some priorities in VW funds based on distressed counties and another system that TDEC developed in trying to evaluate the different counties. But even if you are in a lower priority county, you still have an opportunity to state your case and make an application. Last but not least, the RDE funding is a portion of state EPA or DERA money. Every year nationally, EPA puts out DERA funds, and each of the 10 regions across the United States gets a pocket of money that is usually several $1 million, maybe 10 million and maybe 3 million, depending on the region. Those are big applications. The application guide for that EPA national funds is, I think it's like 60 to 70 pages. There's a lot of little boxes that need to be checked in pursuing that money. But if it's focused on, and obviously that's that DERA money, the D in DERA is for Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. So it's focused on diesel vehicles and older vehicles. Both RDE and EPA National are now allowing vehicles that are younger than 2009 to be replaced. So some of the good news with both of those is you might have a 2011, 12, 13, 14 vehicle that's an older diesel. It's just not as old as 2005 or 2000, that you could still seek funds to get replaced. But that's usually something where it needs to be in a community that has some kind of environmental justice component. There's about 10 boxes that have to be checked, and they actually score proposals on a 100-point system. And you usually need to be getting, what I think most of us would call an a score that's, 85 or above or 90 or above to be able to win projects like that. If we were talking about, 10 big diesel vehicles in a community that serves limited income communities, that might be an example project that would be worth the time and energy it takes to write one of those proposals. That funding usually comes out in the first part of the year. I don't think EPA has released the 2020 money yet, but it's probably coming out fairly soon. But those are some of the funding opportunities that are out there, and each one has different criteria. Either Alexa or I are happy to speak with anyone about those funds and what their requirements or pluses are.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. All right. So in our last 15 plus minutes, we're going to all turn on our cameras and answer any questions that have come in. We've got a few questions that have come in so far. So let me see. I'm going to turn my camera on. All right. We had one question come in, and this may be for Steve, and then other folks can chime in as well. He's curious to hear a little more about the pros for autogas use as compared to electric regarding total cost.
Sure, I'd be glad to address that one. But also, if Billy has actually gone down that road yet of a comparison, that'd be interesting too, because we've worked with quite a few school districts around the country who have been paralleling their acquisition of what they're going to use to replace diesel with, and it's no surprise electricity is a very popular road to go down. But when you actually do a comparison on a school bus or anything more than a passenger vehicle, there are some substantial cost differentials. I did have that one slide that showed, it's about a 300% increase, incremental cost increase to go in the capital expenditure of the vehicle itself. That's not the whole story, as Candace and Billy have both showed in their presentations, and how Happy sets up infrastructure. That's another substantial part of that. For $40,000 worth of equipment that is most of the time rolled into a fuel contract, like Happy was talking about, that's a very tiny amount of money compared to the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for electrical upgrades to make that happen. And I think people need to understand also the the level 1 or level 2 fast chargers that folks are using for passenger vehicles aren't going to suffice for the amount of power that's required to charge a much larger vehicle like the bus. So the infrastructure costs, the capital cost for the actual vehicle, and in my thinking, this is my editorial portion of that. Those were the facts, but my editorial portion of that would be, okay, if I can get 96% of the way there with the harmful tailpipe emissions, with a propane bus that only costs $6,000 more. Look at how many more of those buses I can put on the road to clean up a fleet compared to spending another $300,000.
Thanks, Steve. Does anyone else have anything to add to that question?
Hey, Alexa.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that some of our attendees are some of the only ones that from the school buses perspective have actually an electric bus coming. My understanding is any day now, and then they have some propane buses too. So I think we know that the electric vehicles, anything medium and heavy duty, is really expensive these days, but just wanted to open the door for them to chime in as they wish on anything related to EV to propane comparison. But I won't single them out too much. I'll just let them respond if they wish to about their experience. Of course, they're really fresh, and the EV isn't there yet. But yeah, we don't have a lot of those in Tennessee. I think over the next couple of years, we're probably going to have more of those, and hopefully after a couple of years of use, we'll be able to really look at what is the cost savings of things like electric big stuff, because we just know those capital costs are really high at this point.
And well, the EEIA just came out with a study yesterday that I was looking at, and it was comparing all of the energy use of fuels in cold climate. And diesel goes down a little bit, and gasoline goes down a little bit, and electricity actually goes down 40% in their range on those cold climates. So a lot of that needs to be factored in. I'm not sure that's going to be as big a factor in Tennessee as it will be in Wisconsin, New York, and especially in those Canadian border states where temperatures go far below zero on a consistent basis.
All right. So it looks like we have a question here for Billy, just in terms of fuel pricing. If you could just shed some light on what your diesel price was pre-COVID. Was it similar to today or higher? I think this was a question in regards to some of the fuel cost savings that you were noting.
Yes, fuel cost was greater prior to COVID. I don't have that exact number here to give you, but it was more. I think, and Jonathan can clarify this, I think the original number that propane was based off of was $3 a gallon diesel. So, diesel has come down some, so that margin has tightened a little bit, but the area that I'm going to see the greatest savings over is maintenance cost. We're dealing with an issue right now in our shop today that is going to be about a $3,000 repair, whereas if it was the propane bus, it's probably going to be less than $1,000. So, that's going to be where I see a lot of that. Going back to the other thing with the fuel, one of the things that drew me to the propane over anything else, the fact that we don't have the infrastructure. Propane infrastructure is a lot easier to get set up and get going than compressed natural gas or electric. Of course, in our range area, we're in a mountainous area, so electric, I'm just hesitant on that. And the cost is so vast that we're so impoverished, or in such a impoverished area that our county couldn't afford to to really reach out on that side of it. And then the cost of the infrastructure for natural gas is so great that when our propane supplier offered to set us up with our infrastructure at no cost to us, it was kind of a no-brainer. So hopefully that sheds a little light on the question.
Yeah, those are some great points. And I know on the maintenance side, to your point on that front, I know Clarksville, Montgomery County Schools, which was one of our first school districts in Tennessee to adopt propane school buses, and now they have over 50 in their fleet running on propane. I know that that's something that Ricky Phillip has emphasized too in terms of what they've seen. I think, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I recall Ricky saying that their maintenance costs have been halved, essentially, like they've been cut in half as a result of the propane buses. So they've seen significant savings there.
I agree, and Ricky has been very nice to talk to, districts that were looking at propane school buses and at least tell them what kind of experience he's had. He's now to a point where he has 4 separate propane sites because just the district and the places they have to go is so significant. And I think he has on the order of 350 total school buses. So he's like the 5th largest school district in Tennessee. But I think that's correct. He has seen very big numbers. And back to Billy's, my question to Billy's answer, we certainly know that we go through these, ebbs and flows of what gas and diesel cost, and propane over history tracks. I think Steve may have had this in there, but it's usually 30%, or it can be greater than that on average, less. But yeah, we're in one of those points where in that cycle, diesel is down. So, and it's funny how we talk to new fleets sometimes about this, and we're all kind of focused on stuff we have to do now and things we can see right now. And oftentimes that's the price that's in front of you. If you go back and look at what those prices have been in the past, and I'll use Steve Hightower in Kingsport as an example, he kind of made his plan looking at, some relatively, I guess when he started 2009 and 10, we had gone over the 2007, 2008 price peak, and we were still fairly elevated for diesel and gasoline prices. But invariably a fleet sees that fluctuation in price. And if a fleet especially looks at the times when those cost differences may be low, knowing that they're going to be greater later on, if you wait until those numbers are large in the difference, then you're going to be going through those peaks. It's when you make that plan that you get to reap the benefits of those very large differences in the price sometimes, depending on what's going on in the world.
Now, Jonathan, are you talking about school buses and are you talking about retirement planning? Because it sounds very similar.
Maybe I'm merging topics. It's just coming out this way. No, I'm talking about fuel prices. So
great.
Yeah, it's good to know what those are going to be, because sometimes you have to weather the times when the differences are low to be able to gain the benefits when the differences are large.
Great. And then, Jonathan, I think you had a question for Candace. Or, sorry, did you guys have something else you wanted to add?
I was just going to throw in, Alexa, that for us, we bid out our propane annually. So whatever our price is in July when we do that, it's fixed for the year. So that fluctuation, there's no fluctuation in our propane cost, just our diesel cost, because we're not in a position to buy 40,000 gallon of diesel and store it for the year to be able to get that competitive pricing equal to the propane. So just want to throw that in.
And has all gas on your bid? I guess it's once or twice now, Billy.
I have actually won our bid. It's over 20 years. I think it's like 22 years they've been our supplier. We did have another company that was equal in pricing last year, but when you go to looking at them having to put in new propane tanks and all that, and one of the big things that's a kicker to everybody is the fact that AutoGas was gracious enough to furnish the fueling infrastructure to us at no cost, and everybody else wanted us to pay for that cost up front, which, like I said, we were looking at around $40,000 for the 2 sites minimum just to get started.
Great. I think, Jonathan, you had some questions for Candace on total usage of propane versus gasoline? If you want to
Yeah,
ask that
for those
question.
that are looking at the chat, they can see the discussion, but basically I just wasn't clear if the 300 miles daily average was using propane and gasoline. And she noted that basically that's how that far they can run on propane. So I guess it depends on the route, Candace, as to whether or not somebody just uses almost all propane or uses gas too.
Yes, that's correct. So we did biofuel to basically expand our options because some of our routes are much longer than 300 miles a day. We go to Nashville and Knoxville. So the way our systems work is they operate on propane. Once they reach the temperature that they can operate on propane, they switch to propane and then they stay on propane until that tank runs empty. But having the biofuel system gives us the flexibility for that vehicle to stay in operation just using gasoline rather than propane. And I wanted to add also, we were talking about fuel pricing and gaps and how you realize your savings over a longer period of time. I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I'm talking specifically about gasoline and propane rather than diesel. But in a period of 5 years, of course, we've seen larger cost savings, and then we've seen the gap narrow. But there's only been less than a handful of months where gasoline dipped lower than propane on a price per gallon, and that was this past summer. But we realized the cost savings for every gallon we purchased for the other, 4 years and 9 months that we've operated on propane.
I did have a comment for Billy, if I can. If you don't know Tom Hopkins, I'll introduce you. He does the best school bus driver training for transitioning from diesel to propane, because as you noted with the performance, they're used to doing one thing, with a diesel bus, and that's pushing it all the way down all the time. But he does a driver training for school bus drivers better than anybody else I've ever talked to, and he'll get them up to that 5 and 5.2 miles per gallon if you want him to do one of those Zoom calls with your drivers. I can assure you he'd jump on that.
Well, that'd be great to do. Yeah, I've got one driver that's averaging, she's right at 6, and I got one that's in the mid 4s, and then I got a couple that's just not even making 4. So I've had some discussions with him. Ease up off the pedal. You don't have to, but hopefully in the next semester when I get some more numbers, hopefully that's come up, because it's not to be sexist or anything in this, so don't take this offensively, anyone, but my female driver is actually getting the better fuel mileage of anybody I've got. So it's kind of, rubbing some ribs right there to get their fuel mileage up. So,
but at least you have the spread to show what it's capable of doing.
Yes, sir. Yes, I do. So.
Great. Well, looks like we've got just about 1 minute left. So in our last minute, I want to thank all of our panelists and our speakers for their time and their expertise today. We've really appreciated your input. As was mentioned earlier, this webinar was recorded, and so we'll be able to share this with folks so that people can generate value from it, even beyond today's presentation. And so we look forward to sharing this amongst our stakeholders. If anyone has questions or would like to, run any of us down to learn more about the information that was presented today, I think most everybody included their contact information in their slides. But if you need anyone's contact info, feel free to contact me or Jonathan. You can find us on the Tennessee Clean Fuels website, our contact information, and we'd be happy to get any questions answered or connect you with whoever you may want to get in touch with. But thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. Thank you to Steve and to Perk for your assistance in pulling this together. And I hope everyone has a great holiday season.
Thank you, Alexis.
Same to you.
Holidays.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.